Good morning everybody and welcome back to the channel. I am AmalgamAsh and today I want to begin taking an in-depth look at Monster and Robot Enterprises RPG Architect, specifically at its currently available features. The purpose of this video is to spread awareness and admittedly hype over RPG Architect, as this is a project I believe will continue to grow and gain traction. It is one for independent RPG developers to watch, especially solo devs looking for the right tools for a future project. RPG Architect is a 2D and 3D role-playing game-making engine that has currently been in development for over a year. The engine seeks to meet the needs of beginning and seasoned game devs alike, while removing as many arbitrary restrictions on game developers as possible. I've teased its abilities before by looking at its editor and a map that I made with a few materials, but today I want to show the UI more closely as well as features already implemented in the editor. I will also be talking a bit about the philosophy behind the engine and why it has an edge in a world of similar game-making tools. RPG Architect is still in an early version, and as such, everything we look at today is subject to change, aesthetically or mechanically. If you've seen my earlier video on RPG Architect, you may even notice some changes already. One might define the familiar editor as a what you see is what you get type interface, but there is one key particularity. In many 2D RPG engines, we would spend time creating our map scene in its own editor, such as the one pictured here. RPG Architect follows this convention as well. However, it also allows us to create 3D maps for our game using this two-dimensional representation along with a host of tools that make the process more intuitive. Let's start by taking a tour of the main window of the editor. When we open RPG Architect, this is what we'll see, and this large area that is empty for now is the grid where we will draw our maps. A lot of time designing maps will be spent here as we create set pieces where the game we make takes place. Looking at the top left, we can find icons representing 4 different editing modes, the default of which is tile mode. Tile mode allows us to choose from various tools to draw our map using tiles that are categorized by their type in the drawers on the right-hand side of the screen. Each of these categories can be selected, which allows us to see our currently available tile sets of that type. If we load up the sample file that comes with this engine, we can see that we start out with a few, but it's very easy to import more. Of the tile types, we have animated terraforming, animated flat, standard terraforming, standard structure, and standard flat, and we have modifiers for region, height, and shape. We can think of these tiles as stamps, and think of the empty space here as our canvas, where we will place the tiles to create our map, which is where the player will walk around and interact with the entities that make up our game. The tools available to us to use with our tiles are the paintbrush, which will place one tile at a time or create tiles as we drag our mouse across the map, the paint bucket, which will fill in an area of tiles, the square shape, which will allow us to draw a flat square that will then be filled in by our selected tile, and the circle, which will allow us to draw a circle that will be filled in using the selected tile. Maps are made up of layers of these tiles, and if one layer isn't enough, we can add more, not only above but also below our map, in a 2-dimensional context, like Photoshop or Paint, as well as a 3-dimensional context, think Minecraft or Dragon Quest Builders. And when you create a new project in RPG Architect, you can define the size of the tile that will be used for that project. So the engine will work with popular sizes like 16 by 16, 32 by 32, and 48 by 48, or any size, from 1 pixel to 100 by 100 or more. Next is Entity Mode, which allows us to place the entities that will comprise the interactive elements of our game, such as events. These are placed one at a time by right-clicking a tile on any layer and selecting Add New Entity. From this context menu, we can also see a new game start position, which comes in handy for test playing in different areas. When creating an entity, a new menu will appear, and it is from here we can name the entity, add scripts to define the entity's appearance, conditions, and resulting behavior, and we can browse its local data, allowing us to see every variable and switch local to this entity. We'll look at entities and their scripts in a bit. Next is Doodad Mode. Doodads in RPG Architect are non-interactive visual elements that are not tiles that can be placed on our maps. Finally, we have Lighting Mode, where we can place light sources and specify their position, color, radius, and intensity. Each map created will be listed in a hierarchy where we can rename them or sort them into groups. In the upper right-hand corner, we have 2 buttons, one for opening the folder in which the game project resides, the other for test playing the game. For templated files, this will work right away. Map properties are instantly visible in the lower left window. Here we can see the ID of a map and set its name, as well as background color and music, and height and width in tiles. We can set whether the map will wrap horizontally and or vertically, which will cause it to loop infinitely during play, and we can resize our map on the fly. Camera properties for our maps can be set here as well, allowing us to specify the distance of the camera from the player character, field of view, scale, pitch, yaw, roll, and render distance. Ambient lighting can be easily accessed here as well, giving the user control over ambient and directional color, as well as direction of the light source. There is, of course, an option to disable the ambient lighting per map. Now that we've explored the creation tools, there are a few more things to see in the editor menu above. Besides being able to undo and redo our last actions in the editor, we can toggle advanced mode, grid, and layer assist mode, and force visibility of shape, height, and region. These options will make it easier to discern the important details of your created map. The file menu comes with the typical function of allowing us to create a new project and save it, or open a previously created project file. The help menu checks for updates. In the tools menu, we see the options to open the project directory, as well as test play, but we will now explore the functionality beyond map building by visiting the database menu. The database in this build is separated into 5 sections on the left side. We can see system, characters, maps, statistics, and configuration. We'll look at system first. In system configuration, we can set a variety of default visual options similar to the ones set per map and adjust the size of the window in which the project will run. We can set the sound effects for canceling, confirming, and cursor. We can set our title details here as well, and also choose what initial party members will be present. Our skip title toggle is here as well for faster test play. In characters, we have the ability to import character sheets and configure the height, width, frames, and directionality of each one, so we can use 4 or 8 direction sprites. We also can set up and configure exactly what attributes each of our characters have for our game, and can create, import, and export character level tables for a very high level of fidelity of character growth customization. We can even specify a statistics formula for this stat, and if we need an example of usage, we've got a helpful link right here. In the Maps section, we can configure colliders and gravity, and set whether to use movement based on tiles or pixels. We can also set a specific script to run when we enter or exit a map. Here we can also import our tile sets and configure how they are used. In the Statistics section, we are free to create the various attributes that can be used by our characters in and out of battle for our game. Finally, in the Configuration section, we can completely configure our UI by customizing every menu and submenu the player will use, as well as define the context in which they appear, allowing for extensive control over the UI right out of the box. Finally, here we can also have multiple fonts for our game to use, virtual keys, and create scripts that can be used for common events. Entities can actually contain more than one scripted event, each with its own set of conditions, interaction types, and behavior. We will briefly look at the scripted behaviors that are functional at this time. We can change switches, variables, or display messages, play sound effects, music, background effects, teleport across the map, adjust, lock, or unlock the camera, cause a wait, disable the controls or enable the controls, open or close the menu or the user interface, run a global script, go to the title, new game, reset the game, or exit the game. So speaking now to the philosophy of the software's creation, the engine itself was created with the removal of mechanical limitations in mind. Raising arbitrary limits to improbable numbers, or in some cases as far as the end user's machine capabilities will allow, means giving the game developer complete control over every possible aspect of their game design, allowing them to work with parameters that are extreme. For example, we can import up to 9,999 flat tile sets. We can import 100,000 fonts. We are allowed to access 10,000 global variables and 10,000 global switches from every event. This might seem standard, but if it's not enough, we are given an additional 10,000 local variables and 10,000 local switches with every event created. As for playable characters themselves, there is no upper limit. We were able to create slots for 25,000 characters with ease. We can give them over 100,000 different attributes each, which are tracked or treated differently depending on their category. That means not only implementation of standard stats like strength and dexterity, but multiple experience point systems and levels for things like proficiency with weapons or armor or skills and beyond. We can set a range from 0 to nearly 1 billion for each attribute. Most of these numbers are unheard of for RPG middleware. To assist with projects that take advantage of this scale, player character growth tables are completely customizable and can be exported to a CSV format for editing in a text or spreadsheet program. Instead of forcing us to have a default UI aesthetic or limited control over window background images, we will be able to design every aspect of our UI in the engine and even provide for different styles of interfaces depending on the context. Virtual keys allow us to map a function to every key on the keyboard and/or every input from a gamepad, and full 3D camera control is available right from the start. For game physics, several collider shapes are available. We can select between tile or pixel-based movement, as I showed before, and even gravity is configurable. Now for aspiring third-party plugin developers, the engine is planned to offer plugin support. However, if it wasn't clear enough by this point, the design philosophy of the engine is to answer the need for added functionality by simply having it from the start. Along with the removal of limitations during the game development phase, RPGA is compatible with not only PC but Mac and Linux as well. It is designed for project deployment to those platforms, and RPGA games will tentatively be able to export to formats supported by modern video game console platforms as well. For developers seeking these options. That includes Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch. Well, that's it for this tour. I hope you'll stay tuned for future demonstrations of this engine. It certainly continues to impress, and I think the potential of it is just unreal. Thank you very much for watching, and be sure to share your thoughts, feedback, or questions below. I'm sure the developer of the engine would appreciate it and would like to see more hype or any kind of feedback you might wish to share. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, bye for now.